Lipstick Functional Movement Activity Analysis by Gina Cole. And grasping the lipstick tube. Shoulder is in flexion state using the anterior deltoid and pectoralis muscles. It is in a 70-degree flexion using the joint glenohumeral joint. Elbow is in extension using triceps muscles. Assistive mover, the acromion muscle. Joint is the humeral ulnar joint. Wrist is in neutral state. Pinch grip is using the muscles flexor digitorum and superficialis, flexor digitorum profundus, and palmaris longus. Joints are the IP, DIP, MCP, and the PIP. Bringing lipstick to front and center of chest. Shoulder moves from an extension to a flexion state using the posterior deltoid, latimus dorsi, teres major, pectoralis major, and it is in a 40-degree flexion with a slight internal rotation of 15 degrees using the teres major, pectoralis major, subscapularis, latimus dorsi, and antideltoid muscles. The joint is the glenohumeral joint. Elbow is flexed using the brachialis biceps and brachioradialis muscles with the assistant mover of the pronator teres, and it is in 115-degree flexion. Forearm is in pronation using the pronator teres, pronator quadratus, and it is in a humeral ulnar joint. Wrist is slightly extended of 10 degrees of the right hand using the muscles extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis and extensor carpi ulnaris. The left hand is in neutral position. The joint is radiocarpal joint, and we are still in the pinch grip. Lipstick. Shoulder is in flexion using anterior deltoid and pectoralis muscles. Is a 40-degree flexion with a slight internal rotation of 15 degrees using the teres major, pectoralis major, subscapularis, latimus dorsi, anterior deltoid muscles, and the glenohumeral joint. Elbow is in flexion state using the brachialis, biceps, and brachioradialis muscles. The assistive mover is the pronator teres. It is in 150-degree flexion. Forearm is in pronation and supination, pronator teres, pronator quadralis, bicep, and supinator. Muscles are being used, and then it is the humeral ulnar joint. Wrist is in slight extension of 10 degrees of the right hand using the extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis and the extensor carpi ulnaris. Left hand is neutral, and radiocarpal joint is being used and still in the pincher grip. Lipstick to the mouth. The shoulder is in flexion of 45 degrees. Anterior deltoid and pectoral muscles are being used. Slight shoulder internal rotation and subscapulary muscles of 40-degree internal rotation using the glenohumeral joint. Elbow is flexed using the brachialis, biceps, and brachioradialis muscles. It's 150-degree flexion with assistant muscle of pronator teres. Forearm is in supination using the bicep and supinator muscles. Humeral ulnar joint. Wrist is neutral, and we are still in the pinch grip. Lipstick. Shoulder flexion muscles using anterior deltoid and pectoralis muscles, holding a slight internal rotation using the scapularis muscles, 40-degree internal rotation. Joint is the glenohumeral joint. Elbow is flexed using brachialis, bicep, and brachioradialis muscles, 150-degree flexion of the elbow. Assistive mover is pronator teres. Forearm is in supination using the bicep, supinator muscles. It is in a humeral ulnar joint use. Wrist is in ulnar deviation of 30 degrees using the flexor carpi ulnaris, extensor carpi ulnaris muscles, and then using the joint is the radiocarpal joint, still in the pincher flex. Lipstick continued. Shoulder flexion, anterior deltoid and pectoralis muscles being used at a 45-degree angle of flexion, holding slight anterior rotation, subscapulary muscles, and it is in the glenohumeral joint. Elbow is flexed using biceps brachialis and brachioradialis muscles. Assistive is the pronator teres. Forearm is in supination using the bicep supinator muscles, and the joint is the humeral ulnar joint. Wrist moves into a radial deviation of 30 degrees using the flexor carpi radialis, extensor carpi radialis longus, and the joint is radiocarpal joint, still in the pinch grip. Lipstick back down. Shoulder flexion using anterior deltoid and pectoralis muscles in a 40-degree flexion. Slight anterior rotation of 15 degrees using the teres major and the pectoralis muscles. The joint is the glenohumeral joint. Elbow is flexed using the brachialis, biceps, and brachioradialis muscles. It's 115 degrees of flexion. Forearm moves in pronation and supination using the pronator teres, pronator quadratus, biceps supinator, and it is using the humeral ulnar joint. Wrist is in extension of 15 degrees using the extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis, extensor carpi ulnaris, and it is in the radiocarpal joint, still using the pinch grip. Stick back on table. Shoulder flexion of 70 degrees using the anterior deltoid and pectoralis muscles. The joint is the glenohumeral joint. Elbow extension using the triceps and assistive mover and coneus muscles. The joint is humeral ulnar joint. Wrist is in neutral position with a radiocarpal joint and still in pinch grip. Here are examples for lipstick modification. Both are handheld devices. Grace Makeup is a beauty company for people with disabilities.